So as I constantly say on this channel, I grew up in the early 2000s and really liked Star Wars. So naturally I read a bunch of these junior novels based around characters from the prequel era growing up. These things were made in droves in the 90s and 2000s and evolved a bit over time. This series was actually something of a pseudo-sequel to Jedi Apprentice, with both series written by Jude Watson, and this series would itself be followed up by The Last of the Jedi series, not to be confused with the Star Wars Legends, The Last Jedi book, or The Last Jedi, the Rian Johnson Star Wars film. Jedi Quest was actually set to be a multimedia line, think the Clone Wars, but would have ultimately been minimized to just having a comic book adaptation and supposedly a handful of concept figures, though this is the only one I could actually find looking into this. This series was kind of a tie-in to Attack of the Clones, with this line starting in September of 2001, a famous month because that's the month that Jay-Z would drop his Blueprint album. This series would spawn 11 books, with a couple spin-off books relating to the Jedi Apprentice books as well. There are 10 numbered entries though, with this book, Path to Truth specifically, being unnumbered and considered a special pilot edition. The story starts before the Phantom Menace in 34 BBY when Anakin was a child on Tatooine. One day he was hanging out with his friend Hala, another child from the area, when slavers, led by Crane, enter the system and capture several people to make into slaves. Years later, in 28 BBY, Anakin is finally on his quest to become a Jedi, and with his master Obi-Wan at his side, constructs his first lightsaber while confronting demonous force visions of both Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. After this, the pair is sent on a mission to escort some Colicoid, but they quickly end up meeting with pirates, one of who turns out to be Crane, who took his old friend Hala earlier in the book. Angered by this, Anakin runs in to confront the pirates, but is captured as Obi-Wan escapes. When in captivity, he learns that Hala was murdered for being too rebellious, while meeting a former friend of his master, Siri Tachi, who supposedly left the Jedi to become one of Crane's lieutenants. Eventually, Crane imprisons the Jedi student and Siri, figuring she must still be a Jedi, since it would be too big of a coincidence if two Jedi went after them. And if not, he'd at least kill a possible enemy. Eventually, this leads to the duo creating a prison revolt with the help of Obi-Wan, and Anakin confronts Crane one final time while seeing some flashes of the dark side during his battle. Obi-Wan tells Anakin to spare the pirate, but Anakin ultimately slays the man. After this, Anakin sees a flash of Qui-Gon approving of his actions. Anakin is the lead in this book, which takes place 4 years after he was introduced into the Jedi Order. He's still somewhat haunted by his past on Tatooine, primarily in the book thinking of his friend Hala, who was taken away by the slaver Crane. We see events like his journey to create his first lightsaber, confronting memories of his mother Shmi, Qui-Gon Jinn, and of course Darth Maul. When Anakin finally does find Crane in the book, he is angered and out for revenge, especially after hearing of the death of Hala, for not submitting to Crane's will. I think it was smart that despite this book's junior novel status, Jude Watson, in writing the book, was not afraid to add some dark side temptation to Anakin, or kill off his friend Hala for a functional story use. I think this book does a solid job foreshadowing Anakin as a noble and brave, if cocky, Jedi, with little teases of his later Dark Lord status as Darth Vader, even if the latter is a tad more subtle. Obi-Wan, much like Anakin, is new to being a mentor and a father figure to Anakin, and especially as the kid grows up and excels, Obi-Wan finds it a bit harder to rein him in and teach him. This is definitely the tired but wise Obi-Wan that believes in pondering a problem before jumping in head first, while Anakin is the opposite. It's pretty standard Obi-Wan fare, but I do like the little bit of doubt and fear over how to handle Anakin and seeing his old friend Siri has possibly betrayed the Jedi Order. Siri Tachi in this book is a Jedi in deep cover in Crane's operation. Siri is largely a character for these Jude Watson novels. Definitely an OC Jedi, but I can respect that Jude actually killed her off during the original trilogy era instead of stashing her off like other famous OCs like Dave Filoni's Gems, Ahsoka, and Ezra. Dave Filoni really doesn't like the dramatic stakes of killing off his characters. Star Wars authors love their OCs, by the way. Talon Card is Timothy Zahn's OC. though he's definitely more famous for Thrawn, which I think kind of transitioned into his OC over time. Michael Stackpole has Corran Horn, Michael Reeves has Jax Pavon. It's just something where everyone, when they get a taste of this universe, wants to create their own cool original Jedi. Jude Watson is the only one to ever have the balls to kill them off, though, and she made a lot of characters and killed them all off during Order 66. Oh yeah, that was a total aside for this first book, though. We're getting way ahead of ourselves. Ciri finds Anakin, who thinks she's a giant traitor, till eventually she tells him to shut the hell up and chill because she's just undercover. She's really good friends with Obi-Wan, so trust me, we'll talk more about her, and she's definitely kind of an important aspect of Obi-Wan's story in the Legends continuity. Finally, you have the villain Crane, who's essentially a big slaver who at one point raided Anakin's area on Tatooine, taking and eventually killing Anakin's close friend Hala. Anakin doesn't much fuck with slavery in general, but Crane makes it personal. He is pretty much what you'd expect, a strong, heartless slaver, and Anakin wants him dead. He is functional, but I think it was a smart move on Watson's part to show this as a big early test in the Jedi's career. This man killed a friend of Anakin and perpetrates the slave trade that profited off of him and his mom's lives for years, along with the many other slaves he knew, and with his mom still in captivity, it still hits him pretty close. When he was killed, the book leaves it kind of ambiguous whether Anakin killed him maliciously when he could have been spared or not, which I also found to be somewhat interesting, since we know Anakin was grappling a bit with wanting to kill the slaver and fighting his urge for vengeance, which isn't the Jedi way, but of course eventually seduces Anakin to the dark side. Kind of like the tone we see with the Tusken Raiders in Attack of the Clones later on.
I killed them. I killed them all. They're dead.
The tone of this book is a bit confusing, not really from the text, but the thing is considered a junior novel, but don't really mistake it as being entirely child-friendly. From a violence standpoint, I'd put it on about par with the Clone Wars TV show. It has themes like slavery heavily plastered across it, and has virtually no educational value despite its label as a junior novel. With that said, it isn't a long, droning lore novel, and it is an easy enough read. It's sort of the antithesis of something like the Thrawn canon novels, which are long, complex, and full of wordy paragraphs. Speaking of Clone Wars, I think, like that show, this walks the line of serious and fun that I think will get budding tween Star Wars fans a lot to grip onto. Also, me as a grown 26-year-old man reading this can take it seriously as in much the same way I take an episode of the Clone Wars seriously. So if you like the Clone Wars or Rebels or those kind of shows for older kids and teens as the target demographic where they're more action-packed and fun and less lore-heavy, you'll probably like this story tonally. That kind of ties back into the prose. It's really, really simple, not too wordy, and it's easy to understand despite talking about bigger ideas. Again, I think some Star Wars novels, especially the ones that are more military procedurals, like the newer Thrawn books, are sort of the opposite of what this book is. You can easily understand this book if you read it like a third grade level. And I didn't tell you this, but all of these have been uploaded to YouTube as bootleg audiobooks. They are quick, simple, and exciting, keeping a breakneck pace throughout, and I think that makes them fairly enjoyable. Overall, if you like Star Wars, this series is kind of like those quick pulp periodicals from the 1930s, but for the Star Wars universe. They aren't super adult or hard to read, but as a quick little read, I think Path of Truth is a pretty fun one. It's also nice exploring the 10-odd years between the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones a bit, since that's an era that wasn't touched in media as thoroughly as the time between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, for example, which have had several seasons of televisions dedicated to showing what happened in that era, along with numerous books. Jude Watson does a good job of making herself at home in the Star Wars universe, and I think this will be a fun series of junior novels to explore.